Today, we're doing something a little different. We're not just going to listen to a song, we are performing an autopsy. We're going to take Runnin Thru the 7th with My Woadies and treat it like the dense, complex cultural artifact that it is and see what it can really tell us about our world.
First off, just listen to this. That's the sample that haunts this entire track. It just hangs there, doesn't it? Like some kind of ghostly promise right in the middle of a storm.
Because, look, on the surface, this song is just raw. It's aggressive, it's chaotic, but what if all that chaos isn't random? What if it's actually a super carefully constructed look at addiction, at identity, and the whole search for meaning in a world that just feels hostile? That's the big question we're diving into today.
All right, so to really get the art, you gotta get the world it came from. So let's start with the basics. The people, the place, and the exact moment in time this track was born. First up, you gotta look at who's even on this track. You've got Uicideboys, that's the cousins Scrim and Ruby to Cherry, coming straight out of New Orleans, bringing that real NOLA grit. And then they link up with Pouya, who's this huge force from the Florida scene, which was kind of running parallel at the time. This wasn't just some random feature, you know, this was like a union of two massive underground pillars.
And the timing? Oh man, the timing is everything. We're talking 2015. This track drops right when the whole SoundCloud rap movement is hitting this critical mass. They weren't just riding a wave, they were helping create it. They were defining the sound and the whole vibe for an entire generation of artists who came up on the internet.
And finally, let's talk about the setting. The 7th in the title? That's not just a number they pulled out of a hat. The 7th Ward in New Orleans is a real place. And in this song, it's basically its own character. It's this hostile, oppressive backdrop that literally shapes how the artists see the world, and you can feel it in every single line. Okay, so we've got the context. Now let's talk about the sound itself. Because before a single word is even rapped, the production, which was all done by Scrim, by the way, builds this entire world of dread. The beat itself is telling a story of inescapable doom. So this is basically the blueprint for the whole atmosphere. The tempo, right? It doesn't push you forward, it drags you back. It feels like you're trudging through thick mud. The 808s are all distorted and just heavy as hell. The hi-hats sound totally frantic and anxious. And that raw, lo-fi mix, it's on purpose. It makes it feel like you're listening to a secret confession recorded in some dark basement. Every single choice here serves one purpose, to create this overwhelming feeling of fatalism. And that brings us back to this sample. But this time, let's really break down what it's doing. It's not just there for atmosphere, no way. It's a brilliant piece of storytelling. You put that hopeful little sound against this dark, brutal beat, and the tension is just incredible.
Because here's the absolute key. The fact that it repeats over and over, that perfectly mirrors the cycle of addiction. It's that promise of change, I'll stop this, that's always tomorrow, always just out of reach. It's this tiny little glimmer of hope that the verses then come in and just brutally prove is a lie every single time.
All right, now we get to the absolute heart of this thing. We gotta peel back the layers on the lyrics, because this is where psychology, sociology, and straight-up philosophy all just collide in a few devastating verses. So Ruby Cherry kicks things off with this absolutely shocking line. And at first, you might think, okay, this is just some horrorcore stuff, but it's actually the doorway into this really deep psychological dive. So the question is, who or what is Audi? To get that line, we gotta do a quick detour into psychology, specifically this idea from Carl Jung called the shadow self. And put super simply, it's all the parts of us that we don't like, the parts we try to push down or hide. You know, our own personal darkness.
And boom, that's what makes this so brilliant. Audi Nuff was one of Ruby's old rap names. So when he says he murdered Audi, he's not talking about a real person. He's talking about symbolically killing a past version of himself. He's burying this old, destructive persona so he can figure out who he is now. It's this incredibly radical act of self-creation.
And Ruby keeps going with another one of these killer metaphors. On the surface, yeah, it sounds like a boast, you know, about being cold. But just like before, the real meaning goes so much deeper. It's a profound statement about his own internal world. So the source material we pulled from uses this really wild term for this: thermodynamic invariance of the self. Okay, I know, that's a mouthful, but it's just a complex phrase for a really simple but devastating feeling. It's the idea that his depression isn't temporary, it's a fundamental constant. The outside world, success, money, even the literal summer sun, it can't touch his internal coldness. It's not a mood he's in, it's a core part of who he is. Okay, so now let's flip over to Scrim's verse, which paints this incredible picture of his two-front war for survival. He talks about needing two things, pills and a Smith & Wesson. And you should really think of them as two different kinds of medicine for two different kinds of pain. The pills, they're for the internal battle, the war against depression. That's psychic survival. The gun, that's for the external battle, the war against the streets. That's sociological survival. And then Pouya comes in, and the focus shifts. We move from survival to relationships. But he looks at it through the same cold, almost clinical lens. He doesn't talk about intimacy as something emotional or connecting. He calls it therapeutic. And what's so fascinating about that word choice is how he's basically recoding pleasure. By calling it therapeutic, he's stripping it of all its emotional weight. It's not about connection anymore. It's a functional tool. It's a way to get the brain chemicals of pleasure without any of the risks of, actual emotional attachment. Intimacy becomes this cold, cynical transaction, which makes sense in a world where trusting someone feels like a liability.
So let's pull all these threads together. When you combine that fatalistic production, that haunting sample, and these incredibly dense lyrics, you realize pretty quickly this isn't just a song. It's a complete, cohesive, and really powerful statement.
Think about it. In one 3-minute track, they managed to hit on so many of our modern anxieties. It's a deep dive into the psychology of addiction. It's wrestling with full-blown nihilism. It's painting a vivid picture of a hostile city. And it's a brutal critique of transactional relationships. It's all in there. And ultimately, I think that's why this song has lasted. It's so much more than just dark trap music. It is this unforgettable, brutally honest testament to the struggle of just trying to figure out who you are, of just trying to exist, really, in a world that feels like it's completely lost its meaning.
And that just leaves us with one final big question to chew on. In a world that feels so nihilistic and meaningless, maybe the act of creating art that's this complex, this honest, and this raw about that very meaninglessness, maybe that's the most meaningful thing you can possibly do.